Hello, it's Sam Ulbeek here from samconsulting.com. In this video, I'll be giving you an introduction to E-Rate, the federal program that provides subsidy for broadband for schools and libraries. Now, this introduction assumes no knowledge of the E-Rate program, and I'll keep this quick and high level. E-Rate is a commonly used name for a federal program that provides subsidy for broadband connections to schools and libraries and for the broadband within a school or library. Now, in this video, I'll use the term school or library interchangeably, so if I refer to a school, you can substitute library instead. So E-Rate is the more commonly used name for the program. The official name is the Schools and Libraries Fund. However, throughout this video, I'll refer to the program as E-Rate. Now, the E-Rate program rules are set by the Federal Communications Commission, or the FCC, and implemented by a non-profit company called the Universal Service Administrative Company, or USAC. Now, the Federal Communications Commission is an independent federal agency that is responsible for regulating telecommunications and implementing rules regarding telecommunications. In the section below this YouTube video, I'll have links to these organizations. So as I've mentioned, E-Rate is a program to provide subsidy for a school or library's broadband connection, in addition to the equipment required within a school or library to support broadband. An example of a broadband connection is 100 megabits per second to the school. An example of the equipment required within a school or library could be the routers, the switches, the wireless access points, and also the necessary cabling. The subsidy can range from 20% to 90% of the total broadband cost and is dependent on the poverty level of the school students and whether the school is in an urban or rural area. The poorer the school students' population, the higher the subsidy percentage. And if the school is in a rural area, the subsidy level is higher than if the school is in an urban area. The minimum subsidy level, irrespective of the poverty level of the students, is 20%. Now, the poverty level of the school students can be based on a number of factors, but the most common factor is the number of students participating in the National School Lunch Program. Now, it should be noted that the percentage of students receiving the voucher, the National School Lunch Vouchers, does not equal the subsidy percentage. There's a mapping performed. For example, if 30% of the students are on a free and reduced lunch voucher, the subsidy level would be 50%. So here's an example of the E-Rate subsidy. Assume the subsidy is 70%. This means that if the cost of the broadband connection is $1,000 per month, and the cost of the equipment needed within the school is $10,000, then the E-Rate program will cover $700 per month for the broadband connection and $7,000 for the equipment. Thus, your out-of-pocket cost is $300 per month for the broadband connection and $3,000 for the equipment. So how does it work? How do you actually get the money? Well, there's a process you need to follow that has strict rules and deadlines. And I'll provide a high-level description of the process. But before I do, I need to mention a couple of key terms. The two terms are applicant and service provider. In E-Rate, a school or library or a school district or library system is an applicant. A service provider is the vendor that sells bandwidth and/or equipment to the applicant. E-Rate requires an applicant and service provider to be separate, distinct entities, and E-Rate has specific rules that apply either to the applicant or to the service provider. I'll now speak about the E-Rate process from the perspective of a school or library or applicant, and I'll use these words, school, library, or applicant, interchangeably. The very first thing you need to do is register with USAC and obtain a Billed Entity Number, or BEN, and I give the link below this video. The next step is to let service providers know what you need, so they can provide you the pricing and other necessary details about the service and equipment. You do this by completing a specific form called the Form 470. On the Form 470, you state what you need, then post this form to the USAC website. Now this form is now publicly available for any service provider to view and then respond to. An example of what you might request on the form 470 could be 1 gigabit per second of broadband to the school. For equipment, you might request 4 routers and 20 wireless access points to support broadband within the school. You then need to keep this request open for at least 28 days. In other words, you cannot select a service provider until 28 days after the Form 470 has been posted to the USAC website. This gives service providers time to work on their response and respond. Now, this is very important to remember, and if you forget this and select a service provider before the 28 days, you will be denied the subsidy. This is one of the most important E-rate rules that, if not followed, will result in a funding denial. Now, after your bid response deadline, which is at least 28 days after the Form 470 posting, you see which service providers have responded. You then need to perform a bid evaluation to select the service provider that achieves the most points in your bid evaluation matrix. Note that for the bid evaluation price has to be the highest weighted factor. Not necessarily the highest factor, but the highest weighted. For example, if you have 4 factors, you're considering price, could be worth 40%, quality of service 20%, support 20%, and experience 20%. Now, this is another important E-rate rule that, if not followed, will result in a funding denial. For example, if you had price at 10% and quality of service at 20%, and then you selected a service provider, you would be denied. After you have selected a service provider, you inform USAC of this decision by filing a funding request form, otherwise known as a Form 471. Now, this is where you state to USAC how much the service you are purchasing will cost, and thus what the subsidy amount is that you're requesting. Now, once the funding request form or Form 471 has been submitted to USAC, people at USAC will review the form and check everything is filled out correctly, and everything is as it should be. Now, if there are minor errors on the form, for example, typos, USAC will call you and have the form updated. Now, if there are major issues with your form, then your funding request could get denied. For example, if you submit on your Form 471 a service that you did not request on your Form 470, then USAC will deny you. Now, once USAC has approved your funding request, you can now receive subsidy for the service or for the broadband equipment that you install at your location. Now, to receive subsidy, you would invoice USAC once the service has been provided. Now, there's flexibility in how often you can invoice USAC. For example, once a month or once a quarter are both allowed, as are other time periods. Now, the process I've just described occurs each year, with the E-rate year being from July the 1st to the following June the 30th. For example, a funding request or Form 471 you submit sometime between January and March 2020 would be for service between July the 1st, 2020 and June the 30th, 2021. Now, this concludes the high-level overview of E-rate. If you have any comments, please leave them below, and until the next time, goodbye.